Good morning to everybody, and thank you for joining World Innovation Series. I'm Sandra Sinico, and together with Gustavo Sanchez-Relay, we are the co-founders of Latin Tech UK, a consultancy that provides soft landing services for scale-ups and companies in innovative sectors in different countries of the world. Together with us today, we also have Darlan Moraes from New Option, a business development consultancy for the East European countries, Russia, and Scandinavia.
Today, we have representatives from 3 European countries, Israel, Portugal, and Russia. They will be addressing and showcasing how their countries face the pandemic, the challenges they encountered during the process of preserving local innovative industries, and what were the results of their actions. Here, we will talk about all the key players, civil society, governments, and enterprises. To start, I would like to introduce Beny Rubinstein, Advisory Board Member at Evolution.inc and co-chairman of Future of Health Summit. Anas El Arras, President of the Growth in Portugal, and Alex Uglo, VC and community leader in the startup ecosystem and digital transformation in Russia, and founders of the Gate Club.
So we have so many questions for you all. For example, what can be learned through this experience of having to deal with the impacts of a pandemic? What is the expected future for the innovative industries after COVID-19? What have societies done to protect innovation during these trying times? And in what ways did they succeed? And what are the key lessons we can take from this? Before starting with our guests, I would like to ask anyone who's watching to send questions, if you have any, through our forms below the transmission in our webpage. The questions will be answered after the presentations of the panelists. So for the first presenter, I would like to ask Beny Rubinstein to make his first remarks. Beny, the voice is yours.
Thank you very much, Sandra. Thanks for the warm welcome. Let me actually share my screen with you, and I would love to share with you some thoughts and experiences from the Israeli ecosystem. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. I will talk a little bit about a couple elements that I think are very relevant for everyone. Very, very briefly, I'll talk just a little bit about the ecosystem of innovation in Israel, and more specifically, how the nation, which is, now has this kind of brand of a startup nation, has dealt with COVID-19, both from a technology perspective, looking at the startup ecosystem, the VC ecosystem, but also from a government perspective. Without any further ado, I'll just briefly introduce myself and go through the major milestones that we went through in Israel, and most importantly, what were some of the results achieved, both in terms of great outcomes, as well as in terms of crises and failures, and how we learned and reacted. And hopefully we can have some Q&A at the end of the session. So very briefly, I actually started my journey back in Latin America. I spent about 15 years at Microsoft, was part of many incubation groups, particularly interesting the time I spent at Microsoft Research, where we were launching new health platforms in the UK and Canada. I won't go up through my history there, but I think that the main topic that actually matters is every presentation I give, I use this beautiful quote and picture from Michael Jordan, which is also the theme of what we speak about, which is there is great successes. Israel has definitely a very well prepared technology, R&D, innovation hub. It also has a very strong defense force, which we'll talk about in terms of the role. But at the same time, we also realize that we don't know what we don't know sometimes. And most importantly is the culture of innovation, of actually keeping track of the lessons learned and really being dynamic and agile. So very quickly, just 2 or 3 minutes for those who are not so familiar, Israel, you can see on the map in blue on the left side, it's about the size of New Jersey. It's actually smaller than New Jersey. It's actually a country with about 9 million people today. You know, from many different perspectives, it became kind of a center of innovation for startups. We have a very high density of startups and VCs. Tel Aviv was ranked number 6 in terms of the global startup ecosystems in the world. So I won't go into all the details. There's many different rankings. Israel was ranked number 20 in the World Economic Forum for competitiveness. And there's many matters that we'll briefly talk about here. Just one final disclosure. You know, I think for people who heard about R&Ds from Israel, it's very common to be aware of the cybersecurity technologies that come out of the military and elite units here. But Israel actually is a very big producer of innovation in many different sectors, including digital health, which we're going to talk about today. So I'll skip the other details and get more to the secret sauce. Again, we'll cover that into the reaction on the COVID plan, but one thing to realize is Israel is used to adversity. That the whole nation is surrounded by countries. We have actually peace agreements with a few countries in the neighborhood, but we don't have, unfortunately, diplomatic relationships with some other neighbors. So Israel is in a constant state of alert. In a way, COVID-19 obviously surprised everyone in the world, of course. We were not expecting or prepared for that. But in a way, the mindset is always prepared for emergencies, and that actually helped a little bit with some of the plans that we'll see. I won't talk about the academia, but I'll give you some examples of how some of these core technologies came not only from the elite units in the army, but also came from some of the leading organizations, for example, the Weizmann Institute here on life science and biotech. And many of those organizations, although they are private institutions, they also have had quite a lot of funding from the government in terms of R&D. Again, it's needless to say, but Israel is not only a center of startups. For those who have a chance to visit Israel, there's about 300 R&D centers in Israel from all pretty much large multinationals, including Microsoft, Apple, Google, IBM, and others. So that's just a little disclaimer. And again, talking about R&D expenditure, you know, in terms of percentage of GDP, Israel ranks higher than Korea, Japan, which again explains a little bit where all these greatest research outcomes are coming from. So to get more specific, you know, we're starting a new era. We're using the ACBC new acronym before COVID and after COVID nowadays. And one thing that we will describe in some specific examples is this concept of chutzpah, which will explain what that means. But how do you really foster this kind of adversity mentality, dealing with emergencies and crises, to be actually adaptable? How do we actually turn around the situation in a matter of days and weeks? So I won't go through this story. We don't have much time, but typically there is a story that is told about the shark in the tank. But here the whole point is we are constantly watching a shark on the tank and running around. So chutzpah is a concept that basically says that it's very hard to translate to other languages, but it basically means being innovative. In some cases, chutzpah is actually used in a not so positive context, like somebody who is has no limits, that will go and ask very annoying questions, very aggressive. But in some ways, chutzpah is also the source of non-conformism and challenging assumptions, also challenging hierarchy, which we'll talk about here. And that's exactly how when the whole COVID crisis hit in Israel, many newspapers started to talk about it in February, March, beginning of March. I was returning from a trip to Russia in February, where I was speaking at an AI conference, and the whole thing started to actually take big dimensions in the beginning of March. So the main thing was that Israel tackles this whole coronavirus thing with ingenuity, with chutzpah, and I will explain what that means right now. So very, very summarized, here's kind of the timeline. In a nutshell, What happened was the first cases started to pop in February. I know many different countries had different timelines. March was the month where we started to take it really, really seriously. Throughout the progressive process of quarantine, eventually on April 8th, the government decided we need to do a total lockdown. The country literally stopped, that was kind of the initial reaction. I won't go through every single details, but of course, most of the measurements were decided between the Congress and the Prime Minister. I must say that the communication style was very much like a startup. It was almost every day, if not every other day, on TV, on social media. We could follow the office of the Prime Minister. You'd see a pronouncement of the Prime Minister together with the Minister of Finance, together with the Minister of Health. And not to say that there were no disagreements. Of course, there were many internal disagreements. There was a one voice, basically saying step by step and being very clear, setting the right expectations. We don't have all the answers. We don't know how long this will last. We don't know what's the size of the economic damage to the country, which I'll get to in a while. But we are as we go, we are providing those answers. We're going to get some right, get some wrong. But it's been really, really an ongoing process. It may sound a bit chaotic for some people, but it's the way we operate. It's not there's no way to actually do a very long-term plan at this time. One thing that I wanted to point out again is that I gave this exact presentation on the 28th of April, and the story I told there was very different than I will tell you today. We basically said, look at that. If you really look at March, when the whole thing started, when we crossed the 100. The legend is in Hebrew, but it says amounts of new infected people in Israel per day. So what you see there is that at some point we had a spike. When we crossed the number 100 for Israel, again, a country of 9 million people, we said that this is actually taking a long dimension. We had the very strong measurements, but at the end of April, things look pretty good. Like we took severe measurements. We are kind of planning to reopen, the commerce, the schools, and it felt like victory. And that's as we all know, especially in the startup world, that's when when actually people start to fail. When we start feeling like, yeah, we got it, we're probably going to start having problems. And at that point again, mid-April, there was a ranking published by a Danish company that ranked countries. And basically, Israel was considered the safest country in the world for the times of Corona. Again, this is mid-April. Very, very happy story. One thing that I do want to point out is, before we move to the not so happy part, is that the main area, there were of course a lot of areas of focus, but the main area that was addressed here through the collaboration between the Army and medical institutions was the testing. So at that point in time, there was Israel was number 4 in terms of the OECD countries in terms of the percentage of the population that had been tested. Many other countries had a lot of issues because there's so much unknown. Israel implemented very severe and strict plan to get most people, the most relevant targets of the population. We talk about how tested, so tests per capita. But again, the not so great part of the story that I want to show, kind of the learning experience and how this has changed, is the kind of a second wave started to hit, we actually got into a point where the government set some goals, and says, look, if we actually go over 1,000 new infected people per day, then we're going to have a real problem. Well, it turned out that it became 2,000, and eventually they said, okay, that's really too much. Time to go back. At that point in time, some interesting discussions I'm having with Sandra. Israel is it's a democracy, so people really speak up. At that point in time, the unemployment rates in the country had increased from less than 5% in the past 5 years to over 20%. Lots of small businesses having economic issues, and you can imagine the turnaround in only 2.5 months. So people started to speak up and says, okay, we get it, it's a serious situation, but we don't want, when we heard the talks in the Prime Minister's office of perhaps shutting down completely again, people went on the streets, they protested, they were wearing masks most of the time and keeping distance, but they really, really felt their voice heard. And when that happens, there was a major breakthrough. At mid of July, the government decided that after changing the Minister of Health, as it happened in other countries, and tried different approaches, that it was time to appoint, a leader to actually coordinate the entire plan, the whole strategy around the corona. They also identified that that leader should not be a member of the government for maybe obvious reasons, and should be also somebody with credentials, probably from the academia, and a track record of actually dealing with these kinds of issues. So there was an appointment. They called nicknamed this role as the coronavirus Tsar. There was an appointment of a gentleman who's got tremendous academic background and who's done some really interesting work in the past in different kinds of crises. Again, to very short to the story, we are not in an ideal scenario, but there were many measures that the government took to kind of help a bit the population economically. There was a package of a couple billion that was put together. So every citizen, starting with new immigrants, people with children, old people, disabled people, all the populations that were more at risk, received a small grant from the government to help the most immediate needs, as many of them were put on unpaid leave at work or things of that nature. At the same time, there were other measures that I'll talk about, which actually started to contain, knock on wood, but we had 0 new cases reported in the past 24 hours, which is a huge accomplishment. So in order to kind of summarize, I think, some of the key elements of this strategy, the first thing that I would call out is, again, there's a certain taboo that military organizations and governments are very stiff organizations in many parts of the world. I want to give you specific examples. Those are just 3 out of a dozen examples. One of them is a company called Rafael. Rafael is basically a company that manufactures military equipment. So they, for example, have a plant to maintain tanks. At the beginning of the pandemic, we realized that many of the healthcare professionals, as it happened in the United States, for example, did not have enough equipment. So we didn't have enough goggles. We were not able to import them very quickly with all the flights canceled. So for all those reasons, I'm talking not about weeks or months of adaptation. We're talking about a period of 12 hours where literally a facility that was designed to repair military equipment such as tanks started to produce medical equipment that was needed, and thousands of those. So those are there's many of those examples, but those are some things that I think it's interesting to share and show how, no matter how those organizations have been established for decades and they had a very core mission and skill sets, they were able in a matter of hours to actually readapt their purpose, readapt their processes, and start entering the healthcare space, which is not where they come from. I wanted to share a short video, if you could do that for me, Sandra, that actually tells in 2.5 minutes another fascinating story of how the military work with the academia and some startups have really turned around the situation.
Okay, Beny, here I will play the video, okay?
Thank you.
קיבלתי החלטה, לדעתי זה היה ב-13 לשלישי, הייתי במשרד ראש הממשלה באיזה דיון של חשיבה מחוץ לקופסה, החלטתי לקחת את כל העוצמה הזאת ואת האנשים ולשים אותם על המשימה של לחימה בקורונה, שזה דבר נדיר, לא קורה בעולם, שמשרד ביטחון עושה כזה דבר. המינהל לפיתוח אמצעי לחימה ותשתיות טכנולוגיות, מפא"ת, אחראי לעליונות הטכנולוגית של ביטחון המדינה. לקחו את המוחות המבריקים ואמרו להם, תביאו כל מה שיכול להוציא אותנו מזה. אין רגולציה, אין מגבלות תקציב, ובעיקר אין רעיון שהוא מופרך מדי.
תעשיות הציעו את עצמן למגוון פתרונות, מישהו צריך לבוא ולראות האם הדבר הזה באמת הוא בר מימוש. הוקמו צוותי חשיבה שאמרו, אוקיי, מה הפוטנציאל, מה הטכנולוגיות שקיימות בשוק, ובהתאם לתובנות של הצוותים האלה, החלטנו איזה נושאים אנחנו הולכים עליהם.
אנחנו עושים פה עוד בדיקה, לפני הבדיקה שהגעתי אליה היום, בדיקת נשיפה. אז לקחת אוויר עמוק, לשים את זה לפה ו3 פעמים פו פו פו. מאוד יפה עשתה את זה.
מי שעבר בדרייבין של מד"א בירושלים בזמן האחרון כבר ראה את ינשוף הקורונה בשלב הניסוי.
הפוטנציאל הוא מטורף, הוא גילוי אימות או שלילה תוך פחות מדקה.
גם בדיקת מטוש עם כל הלוגיסטיקה והמעבדות והריאגנטים שתמיד חסר ויומיים לפחות עד התשובה, מה דעתכם על יש או אין תוך 60 שניות? מתי הבנתם שזה Game Changer? שראינו את הקלות הפוטנציאלית של הפתרון אל מול העלות האלטרנטיבית. והבונוס, כנראה שזה עובד גם בארבעת הימים הראשונים שאחרי ההדבקה, חלון הזמנים שבו ה-PCR מזייף קשה.
גילוי פיזיקלי, לא גילוי ביולוגי, זאת אומרת, לא צריך מעבדה, לא צריך איש צוות מיומן, לא צריך לשלוח את זה לאנשהו, מעטפת לוגיסטית הרבה יותר קטנה, ואתה ממש מקבל את התוצאה במקום. קו ייצור של פתרון שמאפשר לך באפס זמן לקבל תשובה, אז בעצם זה יהפוך להיות מדחום. זה המדחום החדש.
זה פרויקט שיכול לשנות את ההתמודדות העולמית. למעשה, אם אנחנו היום בדיון של אם לפתוח את המשק, כמה לפתוח, איך לעשות את זה בצורה בטוחה, זה משנה את כללי המשחק.
הטכנולוגיה הזאת משתמשת בתדרי טרה-הרץ 1,000 טריליון פעמים בשנייה. עד לפני חודש היא שימשה כדי לזהות אם ביצת תרנגולת היא זכר או נקבה. תוך 4 ימים התאימו אותה לזהות אם אדם הוא חולה קורונה או בריא.
ברמת העיקרון אנחנו מזהים חתימה של הווירוס ותופעות הלוואי שלו בתוך הבל הפה. רגע, זה קורונה? שהאזור הזה מונחת, בדרך כלל זה חולה קורונה. איפה אתם יחסית ל-PCR כרגע?
אנחנו כרגע קרובים מאוד.
תהיה מסיבה כשתעברו אותה?
יהיה מסיבה.
בום, תראו את הרגל? זה, לדוגמה, זה קורונה.
Okay, Beny, you take the screen again.
Great. Thank you so much. And again, I want to start wrapping up shortly, but I hope that one thing that you notice in that video is very, very close coordination between government, military, and academia. So, for example, the Shiva Hospital, we're one of the leading organizations here in the health space. Lots of scientists from a startup called Terra Group working together with many scientists in different institutions and hospitals, coordinating that to also the Minister of Defense. So a very interesting example of how we took a concept of a hackathon, but made it in real life. We need to deal with the pandemic. We don't have time for the long cycles of regulatory. We need to go through them, of course, but we need to actually think outside the box, come up with very quick solutions, and then, of course, go through the measurements required to test them, do the proper clinical trial, and that's what has been done. So again, I think you're starting the story, but again, just to summarize, this is a company that has been in existence for 20 years. Terra Group had produced a new technology that actually allowed, for example, to identify the gender of a chick. So it had applications in very different industries. And within a matter of weeks, the company has actually created a repurpose, basically, how to use that technology, created a product and a unit called Biosafety, which I just recently joined for full disclosure, and actually created one of those tests that's unlike a PCR and other tests, they can actually get you a result within a minute. It doesn't require internet connectivity, and it doesn't require all the logistics, for example, to ship it to a laboratory or things of that nature. So that's again just one of many examples, and I'll probably skip through some of them for the sake of time. I wanted to call out, another great startup that I worked with. Kira is also a fellow former Microsoft research scientist. She actually runs a company called Diagnostic Robotics, which actually has been instrumental both for the Israeli government and also working with many governments outside of Israel to actually test or do kind of an analysis to predict what will be the areas where, for a variety of reasons, we'll have probably a faster expansion of the pandemic. And that way, the government started to be able to, based on real data and machine learning algorithms, to actually minimize the total lockdown and actually just in time assess if they needed to close some areas such as Bnei Brak and Jerusalem, which were very, very fastly expanding. I think that's that. I wanted to also mention just one final point, which is in this whole process, again, we need to take very seriously the concept of security, privacy, all those matters. But at the same time, we need to be agile. And because there's no perfect answer, it's a pendulum, it's a balance. One of the things that also happened is initially the decision was we're going to go, although we are very democratic and we respect the privacy of people, we're going to try to save lives. That's the main priority. So there were many technologies that were adopted, such as an application of the mobile. They would actually be able to tell you, for example, if you enter the supermarket right now, it could tell you, you know what, this morning at 10 a.m., somebody who was here has been infected. So, be alert, take some measurements, etc., be in a quarantine. So those kinds of applications, they actually also helped a lot. They're now mainly used to track people that came from abroad or who are infected. But they had a broader use also to help that. There were a lot of debates between surveillance, privacy, monitoring, etc. And eventually there were movements backwards where the Congress pushed back and said, you're going too far. So the government restricted the use of some of those technologies. That said, again, it's another way to also contain that. That was, very instrumental. So again, I wanted to wrap up. I won't go through all of them, but as I mentioned, testing technologies in Israel, there are a variety of them. I showed you Terra Group. There are many different other ones. All of them coming up with very quick ways to try and diagnose corona on time. There are many other companies that actually working on therapeutics. And then, of course, ventilators, which were quite in the news. There were many other different innovations around there. Again, the last point I would like to highlight is collaboration. As I mentioned, Israel has had, great relationships with certain countries and no diplomatic relations, unfortunately, with some countries. This is rapidly changing. We just saw, Terra Group that I mentioned signed a strategic agreement in Abu Dhabi a couple of days ago. It's the first Israeli agreement between an Israeli company and the UAE for collaboration on R&D, and they're going to use this technology as well in the United Arab Emirates. So we see a lot of great collaboration, as I mentioned, between most different kinds of institutions. So I think that's basically sums it up. I wanted just to leave you with like 3 key messages. Again, in the past, we used to talk a lot about IQ and emotional coefficient of intelligence. Now we talk about adaptability, AQ. And I think that's one of the main lessons we have. We had people trained to do specific things. For example, the medical units of the army had been trained to provide the best medical service for soldiers in combat, and they now have been repurposed to actually protect the civilian population internally from the COVID, right? So many different examples on that of adaptability. Again, Terra Group was another example out of many that says, let's not just find a new way to do new things. Let's find a way to do new things and not just do a new way to do the old things. Many kinds of tasks, as I mentioned, are still constrained by time, by logistics, by cost. And they were able to say, we don't want to use the same technology that others. We're going to take that same terahertz technology that we used in the past for other industries, and we're going to make it faster and cheaper and safer for the population to use them. And then again, we don't always get it right the first time. So, let's always try and be aware that we're doing our best, but learning very fast and adapting. So with that, I'm going to sum it up. There were several other items that I was going to cover up, but we can talk with the Q&A. And basically, I think the vision is clear. I wanted to just thanks everyone for the time, and very happy to answer any questions. I would love to hear also your feedback.
Okay, thank you, Beny, and we will have certainly a lot of questions, but I would like to introduce now Portugal and remind you before everything that you may send your comments and questions through our form below the dashboard. So Aras is yours.
Hi. Yeah, hello everyone. Thanks, Sandra, and thank you for the entire team for the great work and efforts that everybody has put in this event webinar together. And I'll be presenting the Portuguese perspective on what has been going on here since the beginning of the pandemic and how the startups and the innovation ecosystem has been doing in order to tackle these issues. Sandra, can you? Yeah.
Sorry,
so
you tell me when to move to the next slide, please?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ana Celeras. I'm founder and CEO of Growing Portugal. So in the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about the Growing Portugal is a company as a service concept, which is quite unique, which is meant mainly to bridge the gap between the opportunities within the European Union and the opportunities within the Portuguese market, and mainly non-European entrepreneurs who are within a perspective to develop their ventures and to expand them beyond the countries where they are based. And this is one of the things that we have been doing for the last 2 years, I would say, and it has been going pretty well because Portugal is somehow an underrated place compared to other countries in terms of startups and innovation. And this is completely wrong. So if I'll be talking more about that and providing a bit more of details about the Portuguese innovation ecosystem and what has been happening here. And I'm pretty sure that you will find it really impressive. So this is a pretty, I would say, young ecosystem here in Portugal, but it has rapidly grown in terms of the growth of the entire constituents within the ecosystem and the involvement of every stakeholder from the private sector to the government, the legislation that has also progressed a lot to make it more and more attractive. So can you please go to the next? I come from quite a unique background. I've lived in 9 different countries, from Japan, South Korea to Indonesia, Canada, Germany, the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and a couple of other countries. I'm not even a Portuguese, and this is an example. This is like a proof that Portugal has been a very welcoming country to everyone, as long as you are committed to contribute to the ecosystem and you believe in it. Then you've got a role to play within this place. For the next slide, there is a video. I will not go through it. There are a few things about Growing Portugal, how we started this whole venture and how we have seen the opportunities and also the possibilities for other entrepreneurs to benefit from this ecosystem. And in the next slide, we will see a few things which are interesting for this webinar today. Since the beginning of March, middle of March, as in every other country, Portugal was among the first countries that installed the lockdown because of the COVID-19. And it has been quite challenging, but the very interesting thing that happened nowhere else in the world was that nobody has been waiting for the government or for the military or for any government institution to initiate anything, but it's the community of startups, of entrepreneurs that gathered together to just to create a movement called Tech for COVID-19, where everybody just gathered. It started with simply with a Slack group, and everybody was saying, okay, hey guys, we need to do something. Okay, we have the potential, the capabilities. Each startup has its own team, its developers, its whatever resources that they have internally. So everybody somehow, they stopped doing what they are doing and they said, okay, let us work together. And that was quite unique, because if we look into how things happened or developed, it was always driven by some other factors, but here it was driven by the community as an own initiative. And we call it here an edge-to-edge business model. So it's a human to human. And there is some really great, traction that happened to see all these things happening at the same time. And every day, almost every 2-3 days, there was something out there like some really great solutions. For example, there is right now in Portugal a kind of like an Airbnb for health professionals, offering like people who have like accommodation, who want to accommodate doctors or nurses or like emergency frontline workers. Like the whole system was established in a matter of days, and the medical staff was able to benefit from that. We've seen also like a really good fundraiser for like purchasing PPE, like protective equipment and ventilators. So the community here took the lead. It did not wait for the validation from anyone or from anywhere, but we just like thought, okay, we should be empowered. We are empowered. So like nobody is doing any politics here or waiting for a green light from anyone. And this was also received pretty well from like the authorities, and everybody was just like present to support in terms of like PR, marketing, etc. And all these solutions, I think right now we're at like 50 plus app solutions that have been developed there, like I mean free for the users, like whether they're like from the medical field or like others, they are free, and nobody is like charging anything for the work or the efforts that they have invested. So there were like loads of things. I will just go through a couple of them, like from having like technical information applications, like free medical consultations, and there are like many of them, some specialized on some disciplines, others which are more like for elderly people. Of course, like the COVID tracking thing, which is also open source, and here it has never been made like mandatory to use it, but like the adoption rates are quite interesting. Like a virtual kind of like triage assistant to really like be able to streamline. It's like a funnel for identifying the cases that have to get like the right attention. Some other simple things, but very useful, especially at the beginning, to tell others that you're home, so that you see within your neighborhood, nobody is hanging out, it's locked down, okay, you have to go home, everybody is home. And of course, like some solutions which have been adopted also by educational institutions for like remote learning, like classrooms and learn from anywhere. Really some really good solutions. And the good thing is that beyond like developing a solution, there's always the need for like the adoption from the end users, and the population has received that very well, from like schools to universities. And like here, I would say that nobody is has any problem saying that yes, this is something great and we need it. So there is this acceptance, and there is this awareness that we need these things, like I mean that come as the result of like hard work, of innovative work, and the adoption has been also really good. This is in terms of like the efforts that have been placed or within the community and that have been received well by the authorities and like the society. In addition to that, if we want to talk a little bit about the pandemic situation over here, you often don't hear much about Portugal, but like sometimes we prefer to be quiet here and just like do things rather than talk about them. So the pandemic, like I mean, the lockdown ended. Portugal was amongst the very first, if not the first country in Europe to ease the lockdown. So in May, almost everything by the end of May was open here. Like from the 4th of May, everything started reopening. And of course, there are like some preventive measures, etc. But the number also of cases has really gone very low. Right now, we are talking about like 100, maximum 200 cases a day in the entire country, like nearly 11 million for a population of 11 million. And we have not seen those like sharp increases throughout like the whole period. So right now, whatever tourism facilities are open, there has been the safe and clean seal, which has been like adopted by the World Travel Organization, and loads of like legislations in place to really set the standards. And the hotels, the beaches, they have reopened. They're also like, there have been the development of some very interesting applications and solutions to track like the social distancing within like the nearby the beach, to know if you can go there or not, or if it has like enough people there that you have to go somewhere else, and loads of really interesting things. And I would say that right now it seems that everything is under control, and that Portugal is doing really good in terms of how it has been reacting uh, within this pandemic situation. And from the other hand, like, I mean, some important things that have also been happening here is the community has been doing its job and beyond, but also, as we will see from the next slide, the government, the private sector, they have also been doing their thing. So as everybody knows, there has been like lots of unemployment caused by the pandemic in every single country. Tourism, which is a big and important industry here, has been affected. And there is a global financial crisis that nobody could just like could ignore. And the government and the private sector, they have put a couple of initiatives or mechanisms that have been helping the startups at least ease their hurdles and overcome the present difficulties. For example, for when it comes to business loans, there has been like a deferral for 6 months initially without any interest, with some very simplified conditions to access that. And right now, like, we're talking about extending it till the end of March. So this has been a joint effort between the banks and the government, but it was also the way it started. It was quite funny. Like, it was just a speech of the president, and he was calling the banks that they have to do something. Like the community is doing things when it comes to innovation, but also the banks, they have to show some support and at least like implement a couple of measures to help. There is one measure that has been, I think, in many other countries, which is simplified layoff. The companies, they could put workers or like employees on partial unemployment, and this was backed by the social security, that like the employees, they get up to 70-80% of their income, and that the companies, they don't have to fire them in order to keep the jobs. Once by the end of like April, beginning of May, as certain businesses, and right now almost every business had the possibility to reopen, there is this program called Adaptar, which is to adapt, and it's an effort from the government and the European Fund to help companies restart doing business, like some grants in order to help do some kind of like layout redesign of offices to ensure that you have got enough like separations, you've got enough cleaning material, or like to infect the place, and also to reposition the business. Can you please go back to the slide? I haven't finished yet. And this is one of the programs. There has been also another program which is still running, Coast Trio Plus program, which is very interesting. It's a hiring incentive. It's that the government has like kind of, in order to reduce this unemployment rate. Right now, there are some criterias, but most of the companies and the startups mainly, they can hire up to 3 resources full-time with like 3 years with open-end contracts, but the salaries and all the expenses, social security, will be subsidized and paid by the government for a period of 3 years, which is quite a thing here, like in order to help these people get out of unemployment, but also it's an incentive for startups who are right now the ones creating jobs, because even if we compare the number of like registered unemployment positions from the startups versus the big companies, it's quite impressive. The startups, they don't want to fire anyone. Some of them, they're like, they don't have enough resources to keep fighting, but it's also, that's the spirit. Like, I mean, sometimes the big corporations, it's just like a matter of profit and loss. But for within the community, in these difficult times, we have seen, for example, there's the resources sharing platform for startups here. So the community, they said, okay, like you might have 10 people on your payroll, you cannot afford to pay 2 or 3, but you need to, for example, 2 developers and you have 2 marketing guys that you don't need that much. So let's exchange resources for 2 weeks or for 2 months just to get things done and to keep like the momentum and to keep the community together. There has also been some special calls for applications, which are like from the government and European funds, like the Compete program, which has been really to encourage these this movement of innovation to keep like producing things, and also compared to the normal process, which has loads of bureaucracy, there has been a very straightforward and simple process in place just to help things, to help like things get going and to get like some cash flow to the startups that deserve it. This is from like the government, European funds, social security, the banks, but also like the venture capital funds like Portugal Ventures, which is the main VC here in Portugal. They made a special like call for applications called InnovID, where they have like awarded grants to loads of startups who have been working towards like putting together some solution which is related to like any of the problems within that were caused by the COVID, from like the queues tracking, the queues within stores, etc. So these are just some of the measures. So to conclude, for me, or like from my perspective, and compared to what I've seen within other countries, I would say that things have been happening here in a good way, and there has been a great involvement from all stakeholders, and everybody here is proud that it was the community that initiated this Tech for COVID movement, and that everybody is more than ever aware on the importance of innovation and the role that the startups are playing to really push things forward and to help the country recover and help it move forward. And I think that this, like in every crisis, there are good and bad things, but there are good learnings. And I think that Portugal is really on the right track towards getting the right positioning it deserves. And it's just a matter of a bit more of hard work and recognition that it will be the best place and the best ecosystem for anyone who is interested in innovation and not that much on politics. I'll be very happy to get any questions after the next presentation. And thank you very much, everyone, for listening to what I had to share.
Thank you so much. I would like to ask Darlan to present our Russian representative, since Darlan lived in Russia so many years. And so it's with you, Darlan.
Thank you, Sandra. So finally, let's know how the innovative industries in Russia are dealing with the pandemic. Don't forget to send your questions right below the transmission. Alex Uglov, please, the room is yours.
Thank you, Darlan. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, everyone who is watching right now. A little bit about me. I'm a founder of Gate Club and VC and community leader in startup ecosystem in Russia. We are founded last year in September with this business club, and discovering the topic of the digital transformation and any kind of technologies who combined in the industries 4.0 in Russia. And please, the next slide. I want to focus on the new neologism we discovered this year. It's a COVID tech. Was coined by analogy with the names of other areas of development of application and of technologies like a fintech, prop tech, ad tech, HR tech, any kind of tech. And this is the technologies in COVID tech covered the technologies focusing on the preventing coronavirus and preventing the spread of the virus. The next slide. For this presentation, I find the different resources. I will share if somebody interested, because a lot of materials, a lot of stuff going on in Russia, but actually no one presenting in English these materials, and I probably be first. And ICT.Moscow, the agency who made the map of the Russian practices in the field of COVID tech, divide into 6 categories. This map, diagnosis of COVID, we have in Russia 13 cases. I mean, the third startups and the companies who are making the screening tests, diagnostics to COVID. 2 companies who are searching for the drugs. One of the company being on the stage of my business club, the Gate Club, last year. They discovering the drugs with AI. Actually, it calls Gero AI. In pandemic period, they raised $2 million actually, and they're doing well. And also the next category is data platforms, analytic knowledge bases, who combine the dashboard, what's going on, and how to make the find the support of the government of any kind of databases. The next categories is controlling to social distances, different applications. It's about 30 cases in Russia right now. Also information support and smart equipment and robots. In total, 80 cases you can find in Russian technological landscape who they prevent the spread of coronavirus. The next slide, please. Of course, all the countries being on the same situation. I mean, the lockdown, we've been with the social distance, and the main barriers in the technology, in the enterprises in our countries, it is the forced in technology, and key factor of this, it's the forced digitalization. And we are must be in the digital right now, because we are start being locked down and can go to the job and to our workplaces. And that's why also probably the very famous internet meme right now about the who made your digital transformation in your company, the CEO, the director of innovation, and the next answer is the COVID-19. Actually, the COVID-19 forced the digitalization in every country, in every enterprise, in every company right now. And the next slide, please. I made some observation of different surveys, and one of the surveys made by Association of Electronic Communications together with the Microsoft and Higher School of Economic, and I will share the numbers, what the statement of innovation industry and technology landscape right now in Russia according to this survey. Next slide, please. Key findings of the study is the remote work as one of the key aspects of the change, of the transformation. About more than 54% of Russian enterprises and companies that took part in the survey switched to the remote operation in whole or in part-time, while until spring 2020. And another 8% of enterprises did not switch to remote work. They are employees. Next slide, please. Actually, 47% of respondents believe that remote work will become of the generally accepted forms of the employment. And at the same time, the following changes will occur: an increase of the electronic document management with clients and counterparties, 41%, and the parallel transition of interaction with clients to remote format, 33%. The spread of use of digital signatures and biometrics for remote confirmation of action, it's about 26% of respondents. The next slide, please. Of course, the video conference in the as we are on the video conference right now and webinar, it's start being super common in the world and super necessary. And the Zoom stocks, this company raised up whatever. They had a lot of issues with the security, but we are doing Zoom video conferences because we are needed to do, because we need to drive our industries to the future. And a lot of companies change their workflow to the video conference instead of meetings. And next slide, please. And the future technologies, according to these surveys, Russians expect the high demand of in business process automation systems, cloud technologies, voice technologies, digital tools, include emails or whatever, tools for online communication, tools for video conferencing, and electronic document management systems, all around the communications in the future world post-pandemic period. And next slide, please. And according to another surveys made by Startup Barometer, I've noticed only 3% of startups have thought about stopping their activities due to crisis. mainly these are projects of the earliest stage, and just formulating ideas and testing the hypothesis. But Russian startups pretty brave, and they don't want to stop their activities, and they're just making a future together, and a lot of collaborations going on here. The next slide, please. And the main government support, in June, the president of Russia announced the packages to support the information technology industry, with the implies a reduction of the rate of insurance fee for IT companies from 14% to 7.6%, and the income tax rate from 20% to 3%. It is the big achievement of the IT lobby companies in Russia, and the government really make the positive way to developing the new technologies and new startups in Russia. The next slide, please. And I will give some perspective how the Russian startups and innovation ecosystem right now looking to the future. They are, I founded the 6 trends, actually five trends of these future trends. The first trend, it is the uncertainty in economic forecasts. We can't do any long-term planning forecast right now, because we don't know probably the new wave of coronavirus or new kind of virus pandemic periods are coming or not. We don't know what's going on actually, and there are a lot of geopolitical issues right now close to border with Russia. I mean the border. I mean the Belarus, and a lot of geopolitical issues with the Chinese and US, and this uncertainty actually impact on the economic wherever in the world. And of course, the trend number 2, it is we need to diversify the industry, diversify the production. Then the trend number 3, we need to increase in automation and internetization to cover the internet as a web to the small cities and villages in Russia. And the trend number 4, of course, the enterprises need for innovative growth, and the trend number 5, it is the new opportunities for startups, because right now the big-sized enterprises are not moving so fast, and the startups is with the curious minds of people, the founders, always trying to solve the problems of the world, and our problems with the COVID as well. And they can use the power of curiosity of their, the technology enterprises can use the power of curiosity of startups founders, and can use their technologies to move forward to growth, and the startups in these cases has a lot of opportunities to grow with the enterprises. And we are in the Russian venture landscape, we are finding right now new phenomena is the corporate venture building as well, and corporate accelerators, and a lot of startups making the pilots with the corporates right now in Russia, and they are pretty welcoming to founders to make with them a joint ventures, and to prevent the coronavirus or to make their growth better. Actually, about myself, I did the 40 interviews with my guests and residents of my club in Gate Club, with the collaboration of media outlet Rusbase. They're discovering the tech entrepreneurship in Russia on their web pages, and I did the 40 interviews with the tech entrepreneurs in Russia, and we tried to make these quarantine interviews to make this some kind of vehicle or platform of communication with each other. I did it on the Facebook page, on my Facebook page, on a Facebook page of this media outlet Rusbase, and it helps a lot to consolidate the power of minds, founders of startups to help to each other, and we did a lot of great job. And actually in the club we already did the first post-pandemic offline event last week about the Russian space private industry, independent industry, and we are discovered the topic of Russian space startups, and gave the perspective to pitch their projects to investors as well. And we are, moving forward with the technology in Russia, and a lot of, good, positive news already. We heard about the government support, and a lot of news are coming as well. And actually, my presentation is over, and I'm pretty open to answer the question or share the material as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Alex. It's very nice to hear from you, from everyone. So the presentations took longer than we thought, and we are almost out of time. But I will drive all the questions to you also. But we have space for 2 questions. The first one I will ask Darlan to make, and then I have the last one.
All right. In terms of the impact, can we measure the impact in US dollars of the pandemic in your innovative industries? Is it possible to have such like a calculation in overall terms?
So the impact in dollars in the innovative industries. Can we, do your countries have any numbers regarding that or not? Not yet. No, Russia says no.
Yeah, we do have.
I tried to find the numbers actually, how many, how much the government spend, how much have been defeated by the startup has been defeated by coronavirus, but we don't measure it yet.
Yeah, Portugal.
In Portugal we are measuring that. So according to the latest statistics, it's between 1.5 to there are like others between 1.5 around 1.5% GDP contribution.
Contribution of the
to the GDP, of the startups.
Yes, but how much was the impact of the COVID in the innovative industries? Did they are increasing their sales because of COVID or the expansion of their markets or are they decreasing?
Right now there are no official statistics, but it really depends on the industry. Like in certain industries, we've seen like a really significant raise, especially for the startups which are working directly with like solutions that are serving the pandemic, like within medical equipment, PPE, etc. They have got like orders that they would never have expected. So some they have like growth of like 300% just over the last 3 to 4 months, and others they have been impacted, so to speak, but like they have been the less ones that were impacted because like the structure of any startup here is quite agile and flexible. But most of them, they had certain negative impact that we cannot yet measure. But as I said during my presentation, everybody at least like is maintaining jobs from the one hand and is continuing its activity, but is also developing things that are as a result of the new needs. But overall, there has been an impact, but I do not believe it's significant.
Okay. Israel? Beny? Do you think you have these numbers or not?
I don't have a full number. What I can say, as I mentioned, is there were lots of different estimates. The main one was around the impact on, as we heard from Anas as well, on small, medium-sized businesses and startups. So the numbers we have, as I mentioned to you, are more in terms of the percentage of the population that moved to a state considered of unemployment or in need of stipend from the government. The package, I can't remember the exact number, but it was quite substantial for helping small businesses and startups. But no, it's the only thing I can say is, Israel, is modeling that more along the lines of not just so much along the lines of financial crisis of 2008. We discussed here about the local VC ecosystem. This is more like 1929 than 2008. So it's a pretty severe impact. We are confident we'll recover, but it's significant.
Okay, and I have also the following questions. Considering the COVID, so isn't it true that the startups and the innovative industries were driven to the center of the scene, and now they are performing a very, very important role in the middle of this pandemic? And would it be right to say that the innovation in the societies, in your societies, will play a different role in the future now from COVID on, or not? Should they go back and live life as always? Is it something changing regarding the innovative industries in your countries? I think Israel is easier to answer, but due to the culture of innovation, but I would like to hear from you if these industries are going to change their role and their importance in your societies.
I mean, like from a Portuguese perspective, it's or I think all over the world, this particular situation has been somehow like a wake-up call that has somehow brought people who have never thought, or like they have not been considering digital transformation in a serious way, to give it the right thoughts and to understand that it's a necessity. It's not just like, I mean, it's something that you may want to do, but it's something that you have to do, that you must do immediately. So this is like, from the one hand, we've got this awareness which will continue. Hopefully, like we will see this vaccine coming, like being produced. So I hope that the Russian one will be, I've read that it's going to be available in 1 month. So let's hope that this situation will be over like sooner or later. But innovation has always been important. It will only gain more and more importance. And within the society, as you asked, Sandra, like within the society, people, they get to feel the importance of this innovation, like within, because everyone, like families, they have kids go to school, schools, they turned into online education. So it's the awareness from business perspective, from a corporate perspective, but also within the society, that like a smartphone is not only about like using social media, but it has loads of things that you can do with, and that you have to learn to use it in a different way. And I believe that, as I mentioned, right now, everyone before, or most of the people before going to the beach, they are checking this COVID-19 application for like for the beach. Whenever they want to go to some mall or department store, they see if they're like, if it's crowded, if it's not. So this adoption has always been there, but I would say it has been accelerated by the current situation, both from a society perspective, but also from all traditional businesses perspective.
Russia?
I agree totally with Anas, because it is. I hope this like a call of the nature helps people to realize the technology can be in as the main power to struggle with this pandemic situation, because the technology it is really not only for entertainment, for not the smartphone is the like a Swiss knife of our the society of our age, and we need to use this wisely and use the whole of the of the capacity of the technology, the scientists giving us right now as vaccines, as the AI screening models, or to discover the better COVID or something diseases, because its impacts also on our mentality as well. We need to transform ourselves to be more flexible, and a lot of structure, old-fashioned structure are defeated by a little virus, and our society must be transformed in a new way. Actually, the main idea, we are right now in isolation, I mean the countries, and a lot of geopolitical power making this vehicle of isolation right now, and the pandemic helps them to to make our countries keep in isolation, in economic isolation. Not only I mean not only with a closed border right now in case of pandemic, but the war with the US and China, economic war, the US and China, with this the funny but not so funny, but this really power of social application of TikTok, yeah. But this is a lot of stuff going on, but this pandemic actually last call to unite the people to struggle with the systems. I mean, the old-fashioned structures, also with governments. I mean, with this society, we need to transform our society with the technologies wisely and use the best practices of all countries. How Russia did. We really tried to observe a lot of best practices how to struggle with this pandemic, and a lot of country, I know the Israel, and with the curiosity minds of Portuguese startups as well, doing the same things. And I think it is the shift of new wave of new digital leaders to help use our resources more wisely and more proper than we used before.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that you talked about like these really fast or booming like solutions like TikTok, and just for your information, like I don't know if you've heard yet or not about Triller, TRILLER, which is like equivalent to TikTok. It's like American, but it has been developed here in the south of Portugal. So, which is also another proof that our ecosystem has lots to say in the future.
Okay, Israel, so your final remarks and responding our question. Yeah.
So just to give a few data points, I was just validating the numbers. In the meantime, in terms of economic impact, just to give you some figures to give you an idea, the government has taken very strong measures, as I mentioned, to try and contain the short-term damage to the economy. Again, prioritizing small businesses, startups in general. So the amounts of funds that was made available through lots of different grants and postponing mortgages and taxes and things of that nature that were mentioned before, they amount to about 80 billion shekel. That's about $2.5 billion roughly. Okay, that's just one data point. The government also announced another 2 billion shekel budget for public health system and other authorities to deal with the crisis. Now, we all bear in mind, on one hand, we all, in a way, I wouldn't say happy, but we are grateful to see those initiatives. But as we all know, that poses a different challenge. And one of the challenges that I think, I'm not sure if it's a driver for change or not, but the whole process for budgeting for the governments, given lots of different events, and including the COVID-19, the budget for 2020 is still not set, right? So we're operating under the premise of we have 1/12 of what we had in 2019. As we know, that's not an ideal model. That's how it's operating right now. So there's a little bit of, although the impact, most of the health system, education system, etc., is functioning. There's a little bit of an impact in terms of not having a full picture on what a budget will be set and how that instability will get solved. But that said, as you mentioned, I think that's in my personal view, I think there's two opportunities that I see here. As you mentioned, we've been very strong at exporting technologies to many other countries. But we're not just exporting. We're actually doing, as I mentioned, a lot more collaborative efforts. I mentioned the example of Abu Dhabi in the UAE. It's a very recent development that we have diplomatic relations. Immediately, we already have a strategic agreement signed for joint R&D for cooperation, not just transactional agreements. That's very, very positive. I think to open doors to many different others. Alex mentioned the vaccine. Of course, we are working hard to design a vaccine here, but we're not in a competition where we want as many people to actually have those. So we saw the global pandemic. We need many suppliers. So the government here already announced that they will test and validate the Russian vaccine to see if that fits. So I think again, typically the Israeli technology industry is already designed for the global market, but I see that that's going to be in both directions a lot beneficial to emerging out of this crisis, how we will learn how to be even more agile and be more adaptive to work with countries that we either collaborated in the past or not. And then, as you said, in terms of innovation, I think the whole innovation ecosystem here, which is already quite innovative, is learning how to reinvent itself. And frankly, we know that there are industries such as tourism. I'm not even mentioning just tourism for fun, but we had a pretty substantial business here of delegations coming from abroad to visit the startup nation, to visit, learn about the ecosystem. And of course, most of those trips are canceled. So there's a lot of people calling and saying, can we digitalize that experience? Can we find other ways to do that? Of course, these kinds of webinars are one way, but there's many other things we need to do. So I think there is an awakening that we need to really accelerate the so-called digital transformation in many industries. Travel tourism is just one of them. We have to do virtual for a while to have the vaccine, and even for many companies, as I mentioned, that had proper technology for industries, more traditional industries like manufacturing, etc. And those also might have been affected in terms of their ability to produce and etc. Right now, not everyone is privileged like us to be working remotely. We are looking at how they adapt that into industries like mining, so that you can fast track the people who actually need to be on site and test them more rapidly. We also see many companies that were not in the health space, which are now entering the health space. So again, I think it's a lot of companies had great technology and tackled very large opportunities. And with those addressable markets being kind of affected now, they're really getting even more agile to, in a very short time frame, learn about a completely new industry, set up a completely new operation, and just leverage that technology and expertise. So I think that's an extra incentive for the ecosystem. And again, although we already had good interaction between the defense forces and the health entities, it just became a lot stronger now, a lot more agile, less bureaucratic. And I think overall, we all going through some pain right now, but it will bring like very, very positive outcomes, both inside the country and across the border.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would like we are coming to the end of this webinar because time is running, the clock is ticking, and well, I'm so glad to have you all here. It was very, very rich presentations and very, very elucidative. And on behalf of Latin Tech UK, I would like to thank you very much for being with us today. And the questions that were not answered will be sent to the panelists and delivered back to you as soon as possible. On 9 September, the countries that we will be speaking to are UK, Germany, and Spain. They will present their strategies to preserve the innovative industries and the key elements to succeed during these challenging times. See you in 2-3 weeks, and at the same time, stay tuned and follow us in the social media and in our website. See you. Ciao. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.